Hey everyone, it's Faith from the Literacy View, and I have something exciting to share. Big Sky has done it again with over 25 hours of powerful literacy content. We're talking mentor recordings, real talk, and absolutely no fluff. And guess what? We've got an exclusive just for our listeners. Normally, it's $199, but not for you. Use the code LiteracyView. That's LITERACYVIEW, all one word, but $30 off. And if you're ready to lead and grow, the Literacy Leadership Mentorship is now open. Same code, same savings. Oh, and yes, the swag is live. You don't have to be in Montana to wear it with pride. All the links are in our show notes. This is the Literacy View, where the nonsense stops and the learning takes off. All codes are in the show notes. That's the Literacy View.
Okay, I have a horror behind. Oh, you're live. All right, so we're live on the Literacy View from the Big Sky Literacy Summit. It's been a really interesting day. We had some lightning strike, and then some of the conference rooms were dark for a little bit, but we're back. When you're passionate about literacy, you make good things happen, and here we are. And we have a very special guest here today. Can you just tell us a little bit about who you are?
Sure. My name is Ola Ozernov-Palchik, and I have a little aura behind me, so it looks sacred. So I am a researcher at MIT and Boston University, and I study kind of the cognitive neuroscience of literacy. I'm a little bit of a weirdo. I started as an educational scientist. I got really interested in the brain, went to become a cognitive neuroscientist, and now I'm kind of a little bit back into schools and education, just thinking about scalability, how to scale up our approaches, how to translate the evidence from the lab into classrooms, and so kind of made a full circle, and now I'm just doing very multidisciplinary kind of work.
So why are you at Big Sky? What's the core message that you're looking to amplify at this literacy conference? Why are you here?
Sure. So I think the big message that I would convey, and I'm not a big message kind of person, I'm a scientist, so it's all like, dissociate everything and look at the small components of things and evaluate them. But the big message I would say is that it's very complicated, that our brains are very complicated. Language comprehension, reading comprehension is really a product of an interaction of sophisticated brain networks that have to kind of be orchestrated and work together to support comprehension. Schools are complicated. Those are very complex systems that are living organisms, and and in order for us to really do this translation of evidence into practice, it's really, really important to understand those complex systems and how to operate them. So there's no silver bullet. And I think that if there's one message that I would like to convey is that there is no silver bullet, and that basically a successful kind of learning outcome of a student, whether it's in the literacy domain or any other domain, is really kind of an effortful integration across all those different domains, the school system domain, across the brain networks, across the home environment. So it's all like a very complex kind of process. So,
do you have any tips on how to make it less complex for practitioners in the field like me?
How to make it less
especially
complex.
When they possibly work in a bureaucratic system where they don't feel like they have a lot of control?
Yeah. So I have multiple approaches, like sort of possible kind of thoughts around that. So I teach a class on trying to interpret educational neuroscience evidence for instruction.
Where is that?
That was at Harvard Graduate School of Education. And I tried to kind of teach my students how to interpret and try to convey and communicate research that is relevant to them. And so there's different heuristics, and I think we don't have enough time for that, but try to understand how to access research and understand whether it's evaluative, whether it's a rigorous research, what does the research shows, whether to trust it. So I think trying to focus on heuristics, they're out there, and I'm happy to share them as well, in order to understand the science. In terms of working in the school system, I've never worked in the school system. I know that it's complex. From my advocacy efforts, I can see how sort of the implementation side of it tends to break, no matter what approach we try to implement. And so what I've heard in terms of advice for practitioners is, find one more person that is kind of supports your vision and try to work together and support each other in implementing things and advocating. But yeah, I mean, I feel like, I think I have more to learn from practitioners who have to implement things successfully in the classroom that to really give it.
Well, I think this is a good start to have a practitioner like me who's in public education for 28 years and you together at the table. So that's part of the beauty of this whole conference. I think the big thing that I'm learning at this conference is there's speech therapists here. There's psychologists here. There's teachers and coaches like me, researchers and scientists. I think that's a beautiful thing. And I hope that what ends up happening is that translates more into the classroom. Because for us, it's really about the kids. So what kind of people are in those classes? Is it people like me that are sitting there desperate to learn?
It's mostly graduate students and education, but they come from a variety of backgrounds. So some will go into administration, some will go into becoming teachers or continuing being teachers, some into policy, some develop ed tech products. I think really kind of this, I see this as a superpower, this ability of taking a scientific article and being able to understand it and extract the main message out of it is as a superpower that, we all kind of need in life. For me, if I need to make a medical decision for my child, can I pull out the research and try to understand, is this should I be trusting this evidence? And so being kind of evidence informed, I think, is an important aspect for every aspect of life, but especially for education, because there is so many approaches, so many tools that are in the schools that have not been evaluated.
That's 100%. Yeah. And you could feel it and you could see it. And especially I'm noticing that we're getting so many curriculums and publishing companies are pushing and they're putting on labels and they're saying this is evidence-based or research-based. And us as practitioners, we're confused. How do we know? How can we be sure? And we've had many guests on the show, like one of them being Nate Joseph, who's broken down the research for us and explained it to us. But very often we see things in the classrooms that don't look like it has a lot of evidence. And we're like, what are we teaching? Why are we teaching this? And is it in the best interest for kids? How can I feel more confident when I'm doing something and don't feel comfortable? What should I do? What could be a clear next step?
Yeah, so I think that kind of this crisis, evidence crisis that we see in the schools, it's the fault really from kind of both directions. We as scientists write papers that are very not transparent and really hard to comprehend.
They're really hard to comprehend,
for anyone who doesn't have full expertise in that field. Our papers historically have been behind paywall, so it really just literally physically inaccessible to educators, unless you pay a small fee of $200 or whatever. So that's on us, right? And that's on our field. And we as a field move towards open science. So we put out preprints out there to make sure that all our papers can be easily accessed. We go on podcasts and write newsletters and whatever else to try to disseminate our research to kind of, across domains. In terms of educators and
just how... I'm going to close the shade for a second. Sorry.
Yeah, sure. I can just continue talking. Yeah. So again, as I mentioned, for educators trying to access the science, I would say, Google the researchers that are potentially affiliated with science. Reach out to them, ask them, can you explain to me what this means? I mean, all of us get inquiries from educators all the time.
That's great.
And we are happy to explain, the findings. I would say that from my experience, the issue is not kind of the availability of evidence or even necessarily, the communication of evidence. I've had the experience, and I know many of my colleagues, of advocating actively and, really kind of having barriers, right? So administration or policymakers not wanting the evidence or not really being open to the evidence, or even teachers. And so I think we have very strongly ingrained beliefs in education. This is actually how I start my courses. I ask all the students, what is one belief you have about education? And then what is the evidence you have to support this belief? Because we were all been students, we have kids who are students, right? So we all have this experience in the system of education. So we all have this we passionately believe something about education. Many people tell me project-based learning, that's the approach to learning, or whatever it is. Engagement means attention means better learning, right? But where does the evidence come from it? And I'm not saying these are two examples not correct. And so I think questioning your beliefs and trying to identify, what are you believing? What are you as a teacher believe about education? And where did you learn this? What is the evidence for this? Are you seeing this evidence in the classroom? Have you read the paper? Did someone convey? I think it's
that's a really good one. That's a really, really good one. Yeah. It's almost interesting though. Like sometimes I'll see different things happening. Like we know now the big push is for explicit instruction. Yeah. But then recently, and I know this might be off topic, I saw for math instruction, a lot of discovery type of learning programs are coming into play. And I'm like, why is that happening? If the research is saying in literacy, we need explicit instruction, why is that happening? Yeah. I didn't explore it enough, but maybe I have to start asking questions. So what kind of questions should remind me, what would I even ask?
Yeah, so I think it's very important when you think about kind of the newest approaches in education is trying to dissociate a description of a particular phenomena versus this needs to be an instructional target. So let me give you an example. Very controversial, right? Using guessing or using a whole language, right? Approach to try to guess.
I don't know if you know, my former training before was balanced literacy. I was a reading recovery person, and that was my whole life. And for the last 8 or 9 years, I've been invested in structured literacy. So this is going to be interesting. So tell me about
it. Here's so as a cognitive scientist, right, without knowing the reading wars, right? We learn.
I know the reading wars.
Yeah, now I know the reading wars. I'm very, very well versed in the reading wars. But before I knew about the reading wars, it was kind of like given to me that, our minds are those predictive machines. We're trying to constantly kind of use our knowledge, use our priors to predict what is coming, right? And we try to guess away the world. And if, our guesses don't match what we see, then we kind of like integrate this new knowledge into our models of the world. That's how we approach the world, right? If I tell you it was windy outside, the boy went out to fly a kite, it's a kite, right? If I said a tomato, you'd be surprised. Why is it tomato? So we constantly try to integrate this new information into prediction. And in language, we know that we predict. When we read, we predict. When we hear what the speakers are saying, we predict. We use the sentence context to try to understand the words. So kids with dyslexia, there's a lot of, Maggie Snelling, there's a lot of people demonstrating that kids with dyslexia use sentence context or semantic context to a greater extent when trying to decode a difficult word. We all use it. When you're at a noisy party, you're at a cocktail party, you not hear half of the things I'm saying. Right. You're gonna use kind of the context of what I'm saying to try to figure out the message of what I'm saying. So that's like a natural process. Does this mean that the fact that we're all doing this, or the kids with dyslexia do it more because they need the stop-down compensatory mechanism, does this mean that this needs to be the target of instruction? That's a completely different question. It's an empirical question. And so what I see a lot in education is confounding of, we observe a particular phenomena. That means that this phenomena should be the target of what we're doing in the classroom. And I think that's like a fallacy. And I think everything that we're doing in the classroom, right, it may inform your approach for developing a curriculum, but then it means you need to evaluate and make sure that the curriculum, using randomized control trials, that this approach is better than something else in improving your target skill.
Now, as teachers, we don't have a lot of control for that. What do we do if something we're being given might have not gone through that rigorous process? Yeah. Do we question? Do we try to make the best of it? What do we do?
Yeah. I mean, so first of all, there's some resources like What Works in Education, Clearinghouse. There's resources online where you can look up particular interventions or particular assessments and see, is there evidence in support of them? So that's like a first thing. Check, is there evidence? Have they been evaluated? If you're not finding this, again, it's like you know better, right? You tell me. So if you see that something, what avenues do you have for advocating, right? I think if more educators are going to advocate for, I'm not going to put this in my classroom. I don't see the evidence. You need to convince me that this works for my students, right? And if more educators raise those questions, right, and advocate for it, then this advocacy comes from multiple levels, that we need something like FDA for educational products. We're not just going to make kids do something days on end without any evidence that it's effective, right? So let's get together, educators. But I don't know if you're an educator in the school system, how much power and how much agency you have to push against, right, your administrator.
You have to be very brave. You have to be very brave, and sometimes it takes having courageous conversations. And sometimes even for myself, like, I might have to present something to my own principal, and he may or not agree. But for me, what's really important is speaking my truth and not being afraid to ask questions and not being afraid to, come back to a difficult conversation. But I think it's those courageous conversations that are really important, because for me, the number one thing is the kids.
Exactly.
The kids. They're only in first grade, hopefully one time. And we need to make sure that more kids could read. I think I'm seeing more positive outcomes lately, happily. In my school, I work in a very poor school district, one of the poorest in New York City. And we had a really successful school year with promising data. But I think it's because of those hard conversations. It's because it didn't happen overnight. It was continued conversations. What does our literacy block look like? What is the research saying? What do kids need? And making sure that we keep talking all on the same language. This is what the kids need right now, and this is what needs to be prioritized. So any more recommendations that you have to turn research into real everyday impact for kids?
Let's take a quick break.
Hey, BS besties! These are the decodables you've been waiting for.
I founded Tumbleweed to cover all 5 pillars of literacy: decoding, fluency, vocabulary, comprehension, phonemic awareness, plus writing and rich read-alouds.
And guess what? It's for all kids learning to read, including older and neurodiverse learners.
The lessons are ready-made, evidence-based, and aligned to the science of reading.
And here's the big surprise. And guess what, Literacy View listeners? Get 10% off for Literacy View listeners only, plus a chance to win exclusive bonuses in a surprise raffle. Now, in order to qualify for this, you need to email faithandjudy@gmail.com. Once again, faithandjudy@gmail.com to get your code and your discount.
And don't forget to visit tumbleweedpublishing.com to learn more.
And from your No BS besties at the Literacy View, check out Tumbleweed books as soon as possible to get this exclusive deal. Thank you, No BS besties. Bye.
I mean, I would say follow the data. I think as a teacher, you can ask, where is the data? What is the data showing, right? I know now, for example, again, back to literacy, which never left. That's the only domain I really know. But in literacy, universal screener is now implemented in most of the schools in the United States, right? The data is collected. Who looks at the data? What is this data being used for? Questions. We have a paper under review where we asked educators a bunch of questions about universal screener implementations. And one picture that comes up is that it's very, very variable, meaning that the amount of training educators receive for using the data to inform instruction, knowing how to interpret the results that they see on the AmClass website, what does it mean for their students, is very limited. Most educators said that this, the pipeline from data from universal screening to instructional decision-making or adaptations is non-existent.
Interesting.
Many educators didn't know how to administer or score data from English language learners, for example, because they were never trained in approaching students with or English language learners.
Can you tell me more about who these teachers that were?
So this is a fully anonymized survey. Those are teachers from across the country who are directly involved with the administration of K through third grade universal reading screeners in the classrooms.
So it looks like we still have a lot of work to do.
We have a lot of work to do. There's just a lot of variability. And basically, the laws are there, but they're kind of like this empty shell. Because if you collect the data and it doesn't really inform instruction, what's the point?
100%. 100%. I think that in New York City, I think there's a lot of progress. I was kind of nervous. We were making a lot of progress right before COVID. Then COVID hit and we took a step behind, but now we regained a lot of speed. But my concern is, unfortunately, every time that there's a new mayor and a new chancellor in New York City, sometimes things start all over again.
Yeah.
Any recommendations on how, regardless of who's in power, we could keep things going?
I mean, doing what you're doing, right? Because ultimately, like if the top down is not working, if the top down is broken, teachers, at least my experience, often kind of know how to navigate complex political kind of situation and just do what they believe is right. And for better or worse.
And I think that's important.
For worse, it's often impact implementation or fidelity of implementation. So if you're trying to, have a particular curriculum integrated into a school, when you start doing observations, you realize that many educators say, you know what, I don't believe that, that's how we should implement this, and they're doing their own thing. But for better is that they could, if they're motivated and they're, interested, to say like, okay, I don't believe that this approach works. I saw that this approach works, right? Or saw the evidence and I'm convinced that this approach is working, and they can just do it, right?
The biggest thing on our podcast has been pedagogy, because programs come and go, but you cannot take away teacher knowledge.
Yeah.
And if a teacher knows what it means to teach a kid how to read and how to write, that's very, very impactful.
Yeah.
So I wanted to know a little bit about assistive technology and AI in terms of like, what are you thinking?
Yeah.
What's the research? Where are we going with that?
Yeah. So I would say first, I'll preface everything I say that there's not much research yet. Not. And what I'm nervous about, so I'm actually very optimistic about the potential of AI.
That's great. So are we on the literacy view?
Yeah. So, but before that, I'll say that I'm nervous that, I think it's like something like a statistic, like only 10% of educational technologies that are currently in the schools have been actually evaluated. And so AI is a booming industry, like multi-billion-dollar industry. I'm afraid that it's going to flood the schools before any evidence can ever reach it. And so that's my concern. In terms of what I see as a promise, I think some of the issues we talked about, I think the issue of scalability, I think the issue of, kind of fidelity, supporting fidelity of implementation, supporting and protecting teacher time. So I think teachers can be more effective and efficient doing.
So give me an example.
So here's an example. You're looking at this very messy dashboard of M-class scores, for example, for all of your students, and you have to click through a bunch of graphs. What if, and this is like within the reach, what if you had an AI kind of natural language supported dashboard where you just ask, show me the students who are at risk. Show me the students who need additional instruction. Okay, the students are already in tier 2 instruction. Show me the students who we need intensified instruction.
Is that happening yet?
It should be happening. It is happening in other fields. AI is revolutionizing kind of data processing at scale, visualization. We're hoping, and we just submitted a grant to kind of move towards that direction within education field.
That's fantastic. What's interesting, I'm going to share a little secret with you. So I've really embraced technology and I love data. It's my area of passion, especially screener data. So I didn't want to give power to AI completely, but I took my data and I talked into my AI, ChatGPT, and I said, this is what I see. I see this. It made me reports and I cross-checked. They were so accurate. It was so helpful. I was so proud because I know data. and I was just still looking at it, but now I had a tool to support me to be more efficient and more organized.
Yes.
And I think that's really exciting that it might even get more sophisticated. And I think that that's very helpful if we could identify the kids that need help quickly and come up with an action plan, because it really is all about action. For me, it's intrinsic. I know how to create action. I think teachers are still struggling with that. Do you think AI will help with the action piece as well?
I think AI can be trained on the right materials. And if it's trained on the right materials, it can definitely use these materials to support a correct course of action. So we don't want something that goes all over the internet and kind of chooses whatever they find, right? We want something that's been fine-tuned on, like, again, evidence-based interaction with students, and then they can kind of go through the material and match the profile of student. I think pattern matching is something that AI does really well.
Tell me a little bit more about that. Give me an example.
In general, I think some of our approaches of understanding disabilities, especially like something like dyslexia, right, has been pretty constrained by kind of our inability to process complex multidimensional data. So what we do is to identify someone who's having dyslexia and research, right? We use like 4 measures, single word measures, fluency, accuracy. We do a composite score. We see someone is performing below a certain threshold. We label them as having dyslexia, right? Then, some of my research is looking at the brain basis of dyslexia and trying to understand what AI-based tool like machine learning can do really well is take multidimensional data and reveal underlying structures in the data. So maybe dyslexia, so you can throw in, for example, a student. So schools have a lot of data. Schools collect a lot of
data. And
their data rich, information poor, right? So they collect a lot of data, but how to interpret this multidimensional data? So we can just label a student as like having dyslexia plus ADHD.
I don't see the dyslexia label on a lot of IEPs. I mean, I'm not a special ed person, but I definitely don't see that label so often. I think almost like, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Is it because they're afraid to label kids with dyslexia?
They say reading disability. Is that what you see?
Other related, right? Why?
I mean, I think there's a kind of inherent misunderstanding of what dyslexia is.
You think that's what it is?
Versus reading disability.
I think it's money.
Why do you think?
I know maybe that's controversial. I think once you label a kid with something, you have to become very accountable.
Yeah.
And maybe, I don't know, maybe people want to save money. Maybe the system doesn't know how to deal with something. Maybe they're worried that somebody's going to want to send the kid to Windward or something. I don't know. It's mind boggling. And I'll tell you a personal story. I had a student many years ago at another site that I was coaching. This student was in first grade. She got left back 3 times. She repeated first grade 3 times. That's systematic failure. She had a history of dyslexia, and yet she didn't have a diagnosis of dyslexia. She had no IEP at that time. Isn't that crazy? How did the system fail that?
Well, I mean,
it showed symptoms.
Yeah.
Her phonological awareness, her decoding skills, everything was there. And yet the system let her repeat first grade 3 times instead of giving her a diagnosis of dyslexia, which could have, I don't know how she's doing now. It's terrifying.
So what I would say is that regardless of the label, even if she was labeled as having reading difficulty, disability, whatever other labels are used, they should have received support regardless. Right? It's not like, if you have dyslexia, then you need to get support. But if you're just like a poor reader, you don't receive support, right? So within like a multi-tier system of support, anyone who's identified as not responding, which is like not performing at expectation for general classroom instruction, should be pulled in for more intensive support. And if they don't respond there, it should be for even more intensive support, right? And so, like, regardless, it's not okay what is happening. And I know it's happening a lot in schools. Students are misidentified. But I think specifically between dyslexia and reading disability is I think there's a misconception within the schools that dyslexia can only be diagnosed by like a neuropsychologist.
Okay, so tell me about this. This is exactly what I want to know a little bit more. Who is qualified to diagnose dyslexia? Are there people in a school building qualified?
Yes.
Tell me more.
So in order to diagnose dyslexia, you basically need to look at like single word performance, fluency measures, right? Again, and below a certain threshold, this child has dyslexia. This is what we as researchers do to identify someone who's having dyslexia. If you want to be more thorough and more accurate, then you also want to continue looking at their progress monitoring data using, again, if they're receiving the right instruction, evidence-based,
Right.
rigorous instruction,
Right.
and with the dosage that they need to receive it, and they're still not responding, then it's more likely that they have dyslexia, right? If you identify a child using these assessments and you just give them a little bit more.
Tell us a little bit more. When you say assessments, tell us the type. Is it more than just the screeners that we're using for benchmarking?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the assessments usually use is like, you want to use a single word type of assessments. You want to get whether or not they're decoding skills, if they have a specific deficit in decoding skills. So outside of this linguistic context, right? So you want to use non-words and words, for example. So Tower, Woodcock-Johnson, right? Kind of measures. You want to look at the timed and non-timed measures, because you want to see some kids are able to kind of get the decoding right, and then they're doing okay. But then as soon as there's a timing component, like how many words can you name in
So we
45
basically
seconds?
start with the classroom teacher with the regular screeners. When the teachers see that the kids are still
Mhm.
struggling in tier 1, tier 2, tier 3,
Mhm.
then these type of assessments.
Oh, so the way I see a screener, and again, I'm not in a school, I'm not a
Right.
reading specialist, I'm not a speech language pathologist, but the screener is just an indicator that additional attention is needed, right?
That's
So-
exactly what
and
Trina Spencer was just talking about, that there's different
Yeah.
type of screeners.
Yeah, so the universal literacy screen, the idea was like, it's not going to identify dyslexia. We need to get it early before the symptoms of reading failure occurs, which is kids are not learning how to read, which happens
Right.
in 3rd or 4th grade. This is when we expect kids to learn, to know how to read, right? And then we kind of transition our instruction from teaching to
read to learn.
Exactly. And so in those first years, right, you can't really diagnose dyslexia because kids are not expected to know. So the way you diagnose dyslexia, again, is you show kids words or non-words, and you ask them to read those words, and you see how well they read those words. You give them a writing assignment, etc. But we can't do that in those first few grades. And so what we do instead is we give them indicators that are like very reliable predictors of us. So phonological awareness, kind of measures that are sound knowledge, language measure, etc. And so even those indicators, the child seemed to be performing in the at-risk level, meaning below whatever standard deviation, below mean,
Yeah.
whatever it is, the cutoff for a particular screener, then you want to give them additional support, right? So then you give them a little bit more support, so some extra time, some more intensive attention, right? And then they just, children self-correct, great. They're not self-correct, they're not responding to this additional support, right? Then you need to intensify the support. And so this is how the model should function, right? You identify needs, you give them what they need. And an important, I think, point in all of this is that this needs to occur in the context of systematic, evidence-based whole classroom instruction.
Right. Otherwise,
Otherwise-
it could be dysteachia.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. and that's the truth. Not every kid does have dyslexia, and some kids
Yeah.
may have developmental language disorder and some may not. But
dyslexia is inherently like children not responding to effective literacy instruction. You can't label someone with dyslexia that never
so
received
who's
an
qualified to diagnose dyslexia? Who are the best people to diagnose dyslexia?
So within the schools, you have reading specialists that can administer these assessments. You have speech language pathologists that in the building that can conduct this assessment. I think different states probably vary in terms of, and different districts have different kind of legislation around it. But inherently, dyslexia does not need to be diagnosed by neuropsychologists. It does not need to
Interesting.
involve a sophisticated battery of assessments.
Will a neuropsychologist have more detailed information than on the school
I think
level?
neuropsychologists can give a more comprehensive evaluation of where potentially deficits lie. But ultimately, from a functional perspective, what we need to get in the building is that the child needs additional support. And the support happens in the building, right? So
Hopefully.
If
there's a really good MTSS system in place,
exactly.
And if there's manpower and
right, but then it doesn't. If the support is not in the building, then it doesn't matter if an outside neuropsychologist is going to identify it, right?
That's true.
So I think yes, I think collecting the comprehensive data, because this comprehensive data that you collect on the child in the building as well is going to inform the instruction. So it needs to be, this is kind of the slope, right? Because, you collect the data, you try a different instructional approach, it's not working, we need to adjust it based on the data. And so this is why this MTSS is very much like the data, if you ever seen the figures, like data is just drives every single decision-making process.
Have you seen the label of dyslexia on IEPs? I
haven't seen many IEPs.
Yeah. I'm curious.
But again, to me, dyslexia and reading disability is the same.
Okay.
It's the same.
Okay.
And I think
don't freak out if you don't see dyslexia, if it says different things. So what terms might I see if I look on an IEP?
Again, I'm not, I'm not sure, but I know that, again, specific reading disability, I think is one of them.
Okay.
Reading difficulty. I think there's sometimes kind of like sub components of it that are specified, but maybe I don't know if Tiffany, if you're
these are only the first of many conversations, and there'll be people that chime in the chat, and there'll be people commenting.
I would love to learn what are the range of, but I think what's important to understand is the dyslexia that we're talking about as a cognitive neuroscientist is the same thing as the reading difficulty you're seeing, because the way we identify dyslexia, which it's not by looking at the brain, it's not by doing anything special, it's by giving kids reading assessment and basically, looking at kids who perform at one standard deviation below on those reading assessments. That is dyslexia. We get their family history, their own history. Did they receive instruction? Did they, just to kind of validate that? But when we say dyslexia, and we get a lot of pushback from reviewers, right? They're like, how do you know the child has dyslexia? You didn't comprehensively assess them. But that's basically what we do. There used to be this kind of discrepancy model, which is a whole other story. You had to be. But nowadays, I think what everyone agrees for, it's really just like a cutoff on this continuous distribution of reading skills. You want to try to eliminate something like language, right? So if you just take reading comprehension and you see someone perform very low reading comprehension, it could be because of a language kind of, maybe just background knowledge. That's why we like to look at like single words and accuracy and fluency. And if those tell the same story, then it's very likely the child has a reading difficulty, right? Again, without instructional history, it's very hard to say because maybe they just never received good instruction.
And I see that sometimes with some kids. Yeah. Because it's funny. I'm working with one kid and they're in 4th grade. They can't really read that much. But the second I'm showing them something one-on-one, everything's clicking. And it's like the process is going really well quickly. So it makes you wonder, what did instruction look like in the classroom? Was it an instructional issue? And maybe it was instructional, and also the child may have been prone to, certain, dyslexia predictors. But sometimes I think it is the instruction.
Right. So,
and maybe it's both.
And it's both, because instruction is like sort of the ultimate protective factor. So you have a child who is at risk for dyslexia, who's coming in, they may have a very strong family history of dyslexia. If they're receiving good instruction, right, at the whole classroom level, then maybe they need a little bit more support. That is a protective factor, because we know that, children who appear at risk on our like universal assessment, like 50% of them, it's like one of the hardest problems that we're trying to solve as researchers is trying to predict which child who's in kindergarten performing at this risk level going to go on to become a typical reader versus actually have dyslexia and have a diagnosis of dyslexia. We can't predict. We're like at 50% prediction.
Okay.
And we tried looking at behavioral measures. We put in brain measures. We, whatever it is, it's really, really hard to predict because it's such a complex interaction of experiential factors, instructional factors, their language skills are a huge, like Maggie Stalling was talking about, is a huge protective factor for a child. They may have a phonological issue, but they may be able to kind of compensate using their language. And I see those kids that come to me and say, like, I had no idea I have dyslexia until I came to medical school, and now I can't compensate anymore.
No way. There's people that get to medical school, and that's what...
There are people who are able to compensate. They're very, very strong language, very high intelligence. They're able to kind of bootstrap themselves to compensate through everything.
Wow.
And ultimately, it breaks down at the fluency level. They just can't keep up once the materials get difficult enough, they just can't keep up because they
Very
can't
interesting.
continue implementing that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So going back to the other topic of AI and
Yeah.
assistive technology, how did you become passionate about that area?
It's a really good question. So we implemented during COVID. It was not supposed to be a remote study. We ended up doing a remote intervention study to develop children's vocabulary knowledge. The idea is that there's a lot of gaps, like socioeconomic gaps in vocabulary development early on, and really a child starts kind of like already not on equal footing in kindergarten. And so we wanted to implement vocabulary instruction in the context of read aloud kind of programs. I don't know if you're familiar with Learning Ally company. So we partnered with Learning Ally. We wanted to do a neuroimaging study. We're going to have kids have access to Learning Ally or Learning Ally plus some explicit instruction and see how their brains change, right? Where we can kind of change the language network, because we know that the language network changes from rich input, linguistic input plus explicit. Anyways, I don't know how much time we have.
Don't worry, no, we're fine. We're fine.
Yeah. So during COVID hit, we were like, this is even more urgent than before, because we knew there's going to be disruption to schooling. We know that, there's the summer slide that people talk about, right? So it can kind of further exacerbate those gaps that we see, which we were right. I mean, I think most of us predicted that's what would happen. And so we implemented a remote audiobook study. So we
tell me about that.
So we had children all over the country. Learning Ally was really good in supporting us, like with recruitment, getting students participate. Basically have 3 conditions. So one group had access to a mindfulness app. So this was our active control.
How old were these kids?
So this is 3rd and 4th graders.
Okay.
Many of them were at home. This was the peak of COVID, like first month. So we assigned some kids into mindfulness. We assigned some kids into access to Learning Ally. But we curated the library of books for them based on their oral language scores. So we measured their oral language scores and we wanted the books to be in this kind of zone of proximal development.
Right.
Not too easy, but still challenging kind of access to rich vocabulary and knowledge. And then the 3rd group, we also assigned them the same access to Learning Ally with the curated library, but we also provided them with scaffolded instruction twice a week for 8 weeks. And
what type of scaffolded instruction?
So the instruction was based on reading for understanding initiative. So the curriculums for comprehension building, read to know. And then the vocabulary itself instruction was really kind of like adapted after back, and many others who kind of talk about you want to reinforce the meaning of a word in different contexts, et cetera, et cetera. Who implemented the instruction was our undergraduate students at MIT and Wellesley University, who were doing it in their homes and dorms, and they were themselves in the middle of this whole upheaval, but we trained them with the curriculum. We did fidelity checks, like monitoring their Zoom sessions, and they did that. So 8 weeks, 2 sessions a week. And what we found is that there were significant gains on vocabulary, both for students who were in this just access to Learning Ally and students who also received this explicit instruction. Not in the mindfulness condition, thank God, right? Because you wouldn't expect just having mindfulness practice to access. The effects were much larger, of course, as you would expect for kids who met with the learning facilitators twice a week and had those sessions. But then
those were virtual.
Those were all virtual.
Okay.
And then when we started looking kind of by students, we then saw kind of interesting patterns, which we also predicted, for example, that for children who are poor readers, and again, we could use dyslexia because we used the same kind of cutoff score to identify them as poor, but they were poor readers. They did not benefit from just having access to the Learning Ally library. And I just want to reinforce that those are audiobooks that are text supplemented. Right? So the idea that they allow kids who have decoding difficulties access much more linguistically rich and knowledge-rich information.
So they're listening to the book?
They're listening and have simultaneous text presented to them. That's how Learning Ally works.
So they're listening to the book, and they're seeing the text on the screen at the same time.
Kind of synchronized.
Well, that's very interesting, because I know a lot of times in the past, we used to have kids listening and there was no text. Mm-hmm. This is very different.
So Learning Ally, it's a really interesting background story. They were around before audiobooks were a thing. So they were like one of the first human-read services. So it's like human-read audiobooks. And I think they started for individuals with visual impairments. And then they kind of expanded into helping children with dyslexia, reading difficulties. But the children who were poor readers who received that explicit instruction really made significant gains in their vocabulary knowledge. And this was proximal vocabulary, so we actually used the words from the books. And so the way the sessions proceeded is like our learning facilitators just checked in with the child, they chatted about the book, really kind of what teachers do in the read aloud kind of context, right? Then they had a particular lesson plan, teach them like inference skills, whatever, like comprehension strategies. And then they worked with them on their vocabulary and they taught them vocabulary. But what I thought was really interesting and what made me think, finally, it's like a very long-winded answer to why AI, is it is a much more scalable study in the sense that, it was remote, so we can access children anywhere. It can be in schools, it can be at home, it can be in rural communities, right? It is facilitated by undergrads. So those were not well-trained teachers who, had years of experience. Those were students who we trained to administer the specific curriculum. And it showed effect sizes were comparable to other effect sizes in the studies. So to me, this means like, okay, well, maybe we can scale it up. Maybe we could have a model where there's a peer tutoring kind of thing going on in the classroom, supporting a child.
On that now?
So that's but because of this kind of scalable nature, I was like, well, maybe the tutoring can be done by AI. And so it's an empirical question, right? Maybe in the context of read aloud, so we have those independent reading blocks. And what do we know that kids do? Children who don't know how to read.
They're wasting time. The book is on top of their head. It's upside down. They're looking what their friend is doing, turn and talk by themselves with another kid. It's a waste of their time.
So it's a waste of time.
Well, can I just chime in? One thing about AI, somebody that I know, they mentioned something interesting about AI. Now, we don't want to believe it, but a teacher could lose patience. AI is persistent.
Yeah.
If a kid doesn't understand something, AI can keep going and going and going and going. What do you think of that?
I mean, it is true. I don't know how the student is going to react.
I know that's true,
right?
I've seen students in the early stages of AI. There was one program I'm not a fan of. A kid got mad at the AI and started talking back to the AI and said, "Hey, what are you doing? I can't read. Why do you keep asking me the same question?"
Right.
And, that brings back the point that not every tool is going to be great,
right?
And that we still need to have more studies done to see what is actually effective and what's not effective. When do you think those kind of studies will start coming out?
So one study we're doing that I wanted to tell you is kind of trying to evaluate. So again, everything is an empirical question, right? I don't think we can make an assumption. Kids will get frustrated. I think we have to test it.
Right.
And so what we're doing, we're developing a platform. It's basically like a read aloud platform. A child can read a book in an audiobook format or read it, and they're going to have an avatar that basically guides them through the process and teaches them vocabulary and enhances their knowledge.
That's funny that you say that, because my next question was how can these tools support all the literacy strands, including vocabulary and comprehension?
So it's specifically focused on vocabulary and comprehension, with the idea that maybe this is something that the child can do during the independent reading blocks, rather than just kind of like,
And it's not to replace the teacher. The teacher's still seeing, but the truth of the matter is, a teacher doesn't have time to see every kid every second, so we have to be strategic. So it's an enhancement to instruction rather than...
For sure. It's definitely not to replace. And in fact, it can inform what the teacher is doing in the classroom. So what if at the end of the session, I is tracking the child's learning? Where's the difficulty? You said, like, we teach the word multiple times. Is it their slope of learning? Are there particular words they're not getting? Is there particular constructions that are difficult for them, right? And what if at the end of the session, they give the teachers the information? Here's what we think is happening in the session, right?
So it could inform their classroom instruction as well. So That's
so
great.
we're developing this like avatar system, but one of the questions I wanted to ask is like, is it going to produce, like, is it going to be pedagogically right? Like, is it going to say the right things? And so what we did is we took all the data we collected in those instructional sessions online via Zoom, we had recording videos, and we transcribed it. And basically we asked, ChatGPT, like a higher model, to kind of fill in the state. So we said, here's the tutor said this, the child responded this, the tutor said this, the child responded this. What would you say in this context, right? And so we had ChatGPT generate those responses, and then we conducted this blind study where we put those responses side by side, or not by side, we just basically randomly presented responses that the human said, an actual human in their study, versus what ChatGPT generated. And we asked adults, and we asked teachers to rate those responses, just rate them in terms of engagement, in terms of efficacy, responsiveness to a child. Like, what do you think? And then we pulled out the responses from AI and then we compared them, side by side. And we did it for like regular adults and we did it for teachers. So what do you think we found? Who performed better? Human tutor versus AI tutor.
Human tutor versus AI tutor.
Who was rated higher?
Well, my gut instinct is to say human, but it's probably the opposite.
It's the opposite. So then that was,
It's unfortunate.
I know.
And some people are going to get uncomfortable with that reality, but I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
Oh my God,
So-
that's terrifying.
Then we asked teachers, because at first we were like just random adults. Like, how about we ask educators? What are they going to say? They have that expertise, they have the knowledge. What do you think they rate?
What did the teachers say? Who's going to teach better, AI or human?
How did they rate?
Oh, how did they rate it? I don't know. You tell me.
Also, yeah.
Same
it was
thing.
Better, yeah. So now this is in the context of like just reading a
That's
conversation.
kind of terrifying a little bit. But I'm still confident that we will not be replaced.
No, because this is in the context of like reading a conversation, right? And it's just one thing, right? The next question we want to evaluate is like if you actually look at like AI communicating with the child live, right? In a transcript, then how is it going, right? So ultimately, we're kind of building up the fully randomized controlled trial to evaluate like, is it effective? Is it engaging?
Interesting.
But I think that was a really interesting finding. That was surprised us, I think.
Do you sometimes see schools or teachers rushing to use assistive technology for students? I have very personal feelings on that.
I think that like just like add tech tools.
Yeah.
Students. And by rushing means like there's no evidence of whether it works or not.
I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
So I see sometimes, because I work with private clients as well, I feel strongly in K-2 that we have to give kids a chance to use a pen and pencil. Even if it's hard, we have to still give them that instruction and work with them. I do believe in assistive technology, but I feel like sometimes people give up so quickly and rush to say, okay, you could just do speech to text and so forth. What is your feeling on that? Are we sometimes rushing and are we giving too many scaffolds too quickly? I don't believe that they shouldn't exist. I believe they can be a game changer for kids, but I still believe that, we have to try to teach kids, especially when they're little, to...
Yeah, that's a great question. One that I keep going back and forth on because, like, for example, audiobooks, right? So on one hand, why should children, yes, like definitely teach kids how to decode, whatever. But while you're doing that, definitely give them access to rich language. Teach them that stories are amazing, right?
Amazing.
Rather than this like frustrating process that they have to try to decode, right? But people ask, do you process information listening to audiobook in the same way you process reading, right? Same with writing, like when you're typing versus when you use ChatGPT versus when you struggle through trying to compose something, right? So
that's true too. That's right. Maybe I'm a hypocrite. I do use assistive technology. That's right.
We don't know what the effects are and what my guess is.
I feel more efficient as a human lately. I feel great. I feel more confident, but I also feel like the reason I'm using it is because I do have knowledge. I know how to prompt well. I know pedagogy, but
But you know their brains are plastic. You have the knowledge, but where is it good, right? So maybe, and again, this is all empirical questions we should investigate, but I think also something to consider is that writing and reading is also a tool that we invented at some point.
Right.
And that Socrates argued like that it's going to make us dumber. And it probably did, because now we don't have to work on our memory system to try to transmit stories from generation to generation. Now we can just write them down.
Wow. Right? You're giving me a lot to think about in Montana tonight. My head is like going wild. So we're going to wrap up in a little bit. So I'm going to speed it up. I have a couple more things. In your perspective, I think we kind of touched upon this, but in your perspective, can online instruction be as effective as in person?
I think what we saw that, yes, like from our remote study, we saw that the effect sizes were comparable to in-person vocabulary instruction.
And this was with a non-human. This was purely AI.
No, that was with a human. Our tutoring human study.
Right, that one.
Yeah. Which made me believe that we can have a more scalable approach, more reachable approach, right? So I think so. I personally don't like teaching online as much
I
as
do
I like
not
in person.
either. But my co-host, Faith Borkowski, she does 100% tutoring or online, and she has a lot of success
So
too.
I wonder if,
I love to see a pencil moving. I love to get feedback on the spot.
I just don't get the energy back when I teach. But I think it's like with everything, there's so much individual variability. And I think the effectiveness of online tutoring depends on for whom, under what conditions, who is implementing it,
right.
what subject,
Do you think
what
that there's
age.
a big difference if it's AI giving the instruction versus a human online?
So here's where it's like, my prediction is yes, right? My prediction is yes, but we need to test this.
That's right.
I don't know. And even further, what if, when we were trying to decide what our tutor going to look like, we were like, is it going to be like a cute puppy, right? Or is it going to be like a human-like avatar? What do kids respond better to?
That's very interesting. I love that there's people like you that test those things for
We
us.
think about it.
We appreciate you.
Yeah.
We appreciate you. All right. So last thing. I don't know if I should torture you and give you 3 BS things in literacy
I don't know if
instruction.
we have time. I'm just kidding.
All right, 2. Give me 2.
Okay. I made a list, and then it was very I think there's a lot of misinformation about neuroscience, which has been a huge BS thing for me, is that people often kind of slap a picture of a brain on their slides, and they think that kind of gives extra meaning to something. So there's a lot of information about our brains and how we learn. We call them neuromyths. There's not been enough kind of there's been some effort to try to dispel those, but they still exist and very ingrained in education. We already touched upon it. My other BS is how many products and things that kids engage on every single day have not been validated, have not been studied. So that's one of the biggest things that annoy me.
Wow, you're super prepared.
Oh yeah, I'm very prepared. I can. Yeah.
Everybody knows that calling out BS every single day.
And then the other thing that I already mentioned is that we advocate for policies, but we don't provide the infrastructure or the support for those policies to be implemented.
That's an important one. And one last thing.
Yeah.
What can we cheer that's happening that's great in your area?
Well, I think people are getting more and more on board with science. I'm not going to say science of reading because it's often misconstrued, but just science in general is something that needs to kind of support what we're doing in education.
Meaning that we're getting more comfortable with it, right? It's becoming a part of our life.
Yeah. And then,
but do you think it's only the people that are most passionate, or do you think it's the everyday classroom teachers too?
It's from my perspective, we've been doing this research and work for 2 decades, right?
Okay.
It wasn't until Emily's Hanford podcast that people started talking about it. We've gone to schools, we've done, but I think it's becoming popularized, and with that there's change coming. And so I'm optimistic about that change.
Good. I like optimism.
And I think we should celebrate the fact that people are talking about this.
Well, language is everything, and we are talking about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we loved having you, and we hope we continue these conversations. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
We're changing lives one view at a time. Thank you so much.
Hi, No BS Besties. It's Judy from the Literacy View, and I wanted to announce some really great news. Faith and I have launched our own consulting services for all of our No BS Besties. So check it out on theliteracyview.com. We have data chats. We have a No BS Bestie helpline. We have Don't Make Me Press the BS Button screeners and assessment work that we do. We'll help you build classroom libraries that build readers. We'll help you with gamifying education and professional learning. We're also really excited to launch our exciting Science of Reading aligned reading retreats. We'll find you, we'll set up, and let's get this party started. We also have parent literacy events that we could help support you with. We could also connect you to literacy experts in the field, create a No BS literacy community, and WhatsApp groups for your school. And also, we're interested in helping you setting up a strong pre-K and foundational skills program in your school. Choose your own literacy adventure. Contact Faith and Judy at gmail.com for our No BS literacy services. And also, you could find out more about all our services on theliteracyview.com.